Welcome to our discussion of the people as a source of presidential power. One of the most important sources of presidential power today comes from the people. Although one president generally will have the same formal powers as the next, president's ability to wield their power, to control the political agenda, and to get things done typically is a function of political skill, charisma, and what political scientist Richard Neustadt has called the power to persuade. Modern presidents work to persuade the public on virtually a continuous basis. They know that if they win popular support for their views and political agenda, they will have an easier time getting their policy priorities through Congress. In their efforts to persuade the people, they exploit the power of their office, using the presidency as a forum from which to speak out on any matter, and to have their views listened to. This ready access to the public ear and broad power of the president to communicate led Theodore Roosevelt to exclaim, "I have got such a bully pulpit." In using their bully pulpit, presidents seek to communicate that their stances on important issues are the right choices and that their actions, particularly controversial decisions, should be supported. Presidents also strive to persuade the public that they are doing a good job on key policy fronts such as economic and foreign policy. Sometimes, presidents seek to mobilize the public to take specific action or to adopt certain beliefs. For example, President Barack Obama attempted to use the bully pulpit to convince the American public that the health care system was in need of reform, and that Congress should enact his proposals to change the system. The reasons why presidents work so tirelessly to win public support for their agenda is that they understand that getting Congress to act on policy priorities, to approve budgets, and to pass favored legislation depends heavily on the perception that the public supports presidential initiatives. Indeed, political scientist Richard Neustadt argues that the modern institution of the presidency is weak, and that presidents in fact must rely on public and congressional support in order to enact their agendas. Getting Congress to do what the president wants is more difficult when a president faces a divided government, the situation in which the president belongs to one political party and Congress is controlled by a majority of members of the other party. For example, when the Republicans lost control of both the House and the Senate in the 2006 congressional elections, President Bush's chances of enacting his legislative priorities, such as privatizing Social Security, decreased significantly because the new Democratic majorities in Congress did not share those priorities. But beyond partisan differences, presidents' ability to get things done in Congress also is a function of their popularity with the people. A popular president can use that clout to persuade members of Congress that his positions are the right ones. An unpopular president will face greater obstacles to having his legislative agenda enacted. When Barack Obama was sworn in as president, fully 67% of the American people approved of the way he was handling his job as president. He enjoyed a strong honeymoon period, a time early in a new president's administration characterized by optimistic approval by the public. As his presidency progressed, however, the presidential approval rating steadily declined, reaching a low point of 43% in August 2010. If you look at these, you can see from February to April of 2009, his job approval rating, that's your first 100 days, and then his 5-year approval rating has steadily declined. As shown in this chart, Americans grew increasingly wary of the president's proposal to reform the nation's health care system and increasingly frustrated at the sluggish rate of the economic recovery. This is a chart that compares the Democrats and the Republicans and their approval ratings. Clearly, the Democrats have a much higher approval rating of the president than do the Republicans. The flow and ebb of presidential popularity during the administration of George W. Bush illustrates how essential the people's support is to the success of a chief executive's initiatives. After the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks and President Bush's rapid and dignified response to them, Bush enjoyed record-high approval ratings. You can see that spike right here. Approval ratings are the percentage of survey respondents who say they approve or strongly approve of the way the president is doing his job. Immediately after September 11th, President Bush's approval ratings hovered in the high 80s, occasionally reaching 90%, meaning that 90% of those surveyed indicated that they approved the way the president was handling his job. In contrast, the average presidential approval rating since the FDR administration was 56%. During this time, Bush had enormous legislative success. These included the passage of the U.S. Patriot Act of 2001, which gave law enforcement officers great authority in handling suspected terrorist acts, and the Congressional Declaration of a War on Terror. When Bush's popularity subsequently waned because of the people's dissatisfaction with the rate of progress in the war in Iraq, the high number of casualties in the war and continued weakness in the American economy, so did support decrease for the continuation of the war, the president's economic policies, and a proposed extension of the U.S. Patriot Act. In general, presidential approval ratings reveal that some presidents are simply more popular than others. For example, Presidents Reagan and Clinton tended to enjoy high approval ratings, with President Clinton's second-term ratings running particularly high, especially in the light of the Monica Lewinsky scandal and the subsequent impeachment proceedings against him. When the United States engages in a short-term military action or is the subject of an attack by terrorists, we see similar peaks of approval ratings, sometimes referred to as the rally around the flag effect. A president rarely sustains high public approval continuously. Once achieved, however, high ratings help the chief executive to achieve his goals by demonstrating the people's support of the presidential agenda. Modern presidents rely heavily on the mass media to convey their message to the people. As presidential candidates, they hire media consultants to assist them in preparing for televised debates. Teams of consultants create sophisticated media strategies that aim to integrate the presidential campaign's use of television, radio, and the internet. Once a president takes office, the expertise of the White House Communications Office kicks in to spin news in a favorable light for the administration. In particular, the White House Communications Director forges relationships with the most prominent media outlets by providing access, exclusive interviews, and scoops on breaking stories to reporters considered friendly to the administration. And today, the president relies on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to communicate directly with the American people. Important national speeches and the State of the Union address are televised and made available on YouTube, just as press conferences are. Interestingly, before the advent of television, presidential press conferences occurred more frequently than they do today, providing the best opportunity for the president to talk to the people and for reporters and their audience to learn about presidential priorities. Although the nature of presidential press conferences and other media forums has evolved over time, the mass media has served as a key avenue by which modern presidents have communicated directly to the population at large. And because the nature of the president's relationship with his constituency is constantly evolving, so too is presidential power.